Welcome to Austin Eras, the podcast that unravels Austin's transformation into a 21st century boomtown and explores its potential future. Brought to you by Collective Advisors, Austin Eras takes you on a journey through the city's evolving landscape and rich history, offering insights into its dynamic past, present, and future.
Welcome to the Austin Eras podcast. I'm your host, Adam Flagg, and I want to introduce you to my longtime friend, Matt Glazer. Matt and I met about a decade ago while out in the Austin networking community, and he's the former executive director of Progress Texas at the Austin Young Chamber, while also serving as community director for WeWork. His career's been diverse, to say the least. In fact, he's focused on launching new ventures and executive and change management. His current venture is Blue Sky Partners, where he recently ascended to CEO there and focuses on social impact, sales and development, and strategic programming with clients like the City of Austin and the Aspen Institute. The most interesting thing about Matt is that for as long as I've known him, there's always some other surprise or something unexpected that despite all of our conversations, I learned something new. He helped launch the Weird Homes Tour and Capital Intelligence, and just in the last year or two, he served as interim executive director for a handful of nonprofits in Austin. In addition to his crazy schedule, he serves as entrepreneur in residence for Trinity University. He's a graduate from both Trinity for his undergrad, Master's of Science in Technology Commercialization from the University of Texas. And my favorite part of the bio, he's a diehard Astros fan, loves the Muppets more than anyone I know. He's a vinyl collector, he's a runner. He knows everything about culinary and bar destinations in the city, and he's married to the wonderful Callie. I went to their amazing wedding in New Orleans, and without further ado, here's the CEO of Blue Sky Partners, Matt Glazer. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad this is a podcast because I am blushing from the top of my very bald head.
Yeah, it is a little red.
It's a little red right now, isn't it? Yeah, look what you did. Yeah,
but it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. You know, when we talked about launching this podcast, I immediately thought Matt's got to be on it. Matt's done a lot of interesting things. You know, the interesting part, though, is we're on a podcast about Austin. You did not grow up here. You actually grew up in Central Texas, but just not...
No, I grew up in Houston.
In Houston.
Yeah, so I actually describe myself as a nomadic Texan because I grew up in northern Houston.
Okay.
Split my time with my grandparents in Midlothian, which is now a suburb of Dallas, but it was definitely not a suburb back then. My mom and dad, when they split, my mom moved back up to Dallas, so my family's now all up in Dallas from Midlothian all the way up to Frisco.
Okay.
Went to college in San Antonio. Yeah, so I just everywhere. Kind of a little bit of everywhere, not to mention the campaign work I used to do.
So you've seen all the big cities in Texas, and you've probably seen all the small cities too.
A lot of the small ones, yeah. And also Callie is from Lockhart, Luling, that area. So she's the Central Texas native. So we've even seen that area really become what it has become.
But she was country, right? She grew up as a country kid,
not an Austin kid. I would not describe my wife one way or the other. She would describe herself.
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't describe her that way.
But, cattle rancher's daughter in Texas.
Yeah, I like that. So you've gotten the total Texas experience. So what's your first experience? What's your first memory of Austin?
Well, I think it was the live music capital of the world. I mean, I was in San Antonio going to college, and we would come up here and go to Emos or Antones or, see shows and see Spoon and these up and coming bands. I can't even remember half their names, but we would go see Jimmy Eat World at La Zona Rosa or the old Austin Music Hall. And then we would drive back to San Antonio. And it was that was kind of what Austin was for me, was this place where honestly I could get a drink a little underage and, go see live music and have a good time and then skedaddle back to San Antonio.
Well, okay, so tell me a little bit more about San Antonio. So you went to Trinity. Yeah. And Trinity is kind of I'll call it a hidden gem. I feel like it's an academic school. It's well known. A lot of great people have gone to school there. But how did you get to Trinity, and what was that experience like?
So I, as a kid, grew up in an era when ER and West Wing were on television, right? And so I either wanted to be a doctor or in politics. And so I was really fortunate that I had a really supportive mom. She's still alive. But, she took me to go see a surgery, and, the second that I saw blood, I passed out. So early in my life, I was I am not going to be a doctor. And so for whatever reason, I decided I'm going to do politics. Well, Trinity is a small liberal arts school in San Antonio. It's a great school, but it has also one of the best political science departments in the country. And so I went to Trinity mostly because of the political science department.
Okay.
And I went to high school at a really big public high school in Austin or in Houston, Klein High School, and Lee Pace went there, and Matt Bomer went there, and Lyle Lovett went there, and it was, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 students.
Huge school.
And so I was like, I actively made the decision that I wanted to go somewhere smaller. And so there, that took out UT, that took out like A&M, like all those places that a lot of people would go. But I wanted to stay in Texas, and I didn't want to be in Houston anymore. So there was like this kind of perfect amalgamation of things I was looking for in Trinity. And honestly, it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made, because my wife went to Trinity. We never knew each other, but like we had mutual friends. A really dear friend of mine, Andrew Cates, who is a really amazing ethics lawyer, was on the board of the Austin Young Chamber. If I hadn't gone to school at Trinity, I don't know that I would have ever been the ED at AYC. Like there's a kind of this perfect, chance encounters that all turn into what my life is today.
Interesting. So you do the Trinity thing. You go over to Austin a few times, go check out live music. You have the fun. You graduate from school, and I think you're part of a think tank or two, a couple little companies. But your big political move is Progress Texas a few years out of college. No,
so there's a big period of time where I leave Austin, or I keep saying this, leave San Antonio, and I was in political campaigns. I did that. Okay. And I did that for a number of years. And so I started moving around. And so immediately after college, I went to New Mexico and worked on an initiative called the New Voters Project.
Okay.
And so I worked for youth voter mobilization in northern New Mexico from Albuquerque up, right? Did that for like 6 months through the 2004 elections after having worked for a presidential primary. Mm-hmm. And then after that was over, I went to another place and another place and another place. And so I bounced around the country, living in like Davenport and Atlanta and Seattle and Boston. I lived all over the country. And it wasn't until, I think 2007 that I realized it's like, I'm miserable. And I moved back to Texas. Okay. But I moved to San Antonio, and I got a job working at the legislature eventually.
Okay.
And I got tired of doing that commute from San Antonio to Austin, but I did it for years.
Okay.
And then I decided to make the move and do that. But I worked on campaigns. I worked on Lee Leffingwell's campaign. I worked on, John Lipscomb's campaign, who was a judge. I worked on a bunch of judicial races. And it wasn't until the 2010 election cycle where Democrats got kind of wiped out, and I was a Democratic consultant. I was like, I have this idea. And I worked with Kim Taylor and then at the time just an attorney, Steve Adler, who ended up becoming mayor, and a bunch of folks. And they had this idea about Progress Texas. And I was the inaugural ED. But I went through kind of an interview process to talk about my vision and got the role. And I was there for 4 years. And so this is that kind of non-linear thing. But I was always kind of dabbling in startups and events and other things.
Sure.
And I've never been content doing one thing at a time. And so I never did one thing at a time.
I think that's in the DNA of a lot of people that are Austin leaders. Is they can't do one thing at a time. You got to do 5 things at a time.
That's right.
You're trying to change and push and move different areas.
Well, and when you're young, when you're 25 years old, 26 years old, do you know what you want to be when you're growing up? And especially in a town where there's startups and policy and politics, and there's so many options that I just kind of had the fun of experimenting.
So you did these political campaigns, and when do you get thanked on national TV under the wrong name? Tell us that story, because you told me this years ago, and I'd never forgotten it since.
So that was after 2004. So in 2004, I was working with and around John Kerry, and he was the presidential candidate at the time against George Bush. Well, I kind of got connected with other folks, and he and his wife wrote a book. And I don't know if it was exactly 2004 or 2005, but I had basically helped with the promotion of his book. And so he goes on to MSNBC, and also the time I'm writing, so it must have been later, I was also writing for Burnt Orange Report when I was writing some political blog type stuff, and it's gone. And RIP, I missed that. That was one of the highlights of my career. And John Kerry goes on to MSNBC, and I can't remember who he's interviewing with. And he goes, hey, I just want to pause for a second. And I want to say thank you to all the folks out there, but specifically Max Glazer, who writes at the Burnt Out Orange Report. And so he got my name wrong and what I was doing wrong, but both titles were better. And so now my pseudonym is Max Glazer.
Max Glazer is great. I was actually, I think, doing some typing, and I think I put the L before the G or the L.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to kind of screw that up. I can see how you could be Max Glazer.
It is such a perfect, and when it happened, I was like, well, that's just better. I can't be mad.
Yeah.
And the people that knew immediately were texting me Max Glazer, all these exclamation points. And it has become like the thing that like when I used to play video games all the time, I was like Max Laser, right? Like
you should have had like a meme, like a video of it, and you could have like a Max Laser. Maybe we should find the clip somewhere.
Well, and like we could listen to Nature Laser while being Max Laser.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah. So I can hear your vinyl collecting coming out right there.
Yeah, that's
so we'll just go off tangent because this is the fun of it. Tell me about vinyl stuff. We chatted a little bit about this, but what got you into that? Was it traveling to all the different cities and?
No, I think like a lot of folks of kind of our age, right, is like my family was about to throw out a bunch of vinyl.
Yeah.
And like so I went through and I looked at like my grandfather's vinyl collection, right? And so what started with me saving my grandfather's Johnny Cash record or Ray Charles record or Sam Cooke record, like, or Willie Nelson, right, turned into, well, my mom doesn't really have a good record player, so I'm going to take hers too. And then so now I've got the Beatles and I've got Sam Cooke and then, well, now there's all these services out there like Vinyl Me Please. And so I sign up for that. And then it just becomes now like, well, now there's Record Store Day and I can go support End of an Ear or Waterloo Records. So now I'm adding to it. Oh, now I'm in Nashville and Third Man Records is here. Yeah. I'm going to go grab some stuff there. And so it has become like a real problem. Like it's probably, I don't have like a lot of things that I spend irrational money on. It's like I spend too much money on liquor. I like really good bottles of liquor.
Okay.
I like nice watches. Right. And I'm wearing like my Swatch watch right now.
Love it.
And I really like having good records. And so I treat records kind of like I do like books. I don't own a lot, but the ones I do are like my favorites. And so like, I have like Spoon, like Kill the Moonlight. And I have Black Pumas. Like, I mean, just like, it's like my favorite stuff.
Yeah, no, Spoon's great. I just saw them at the UT Georgia tailgate a little while back. They're one of my favorite bands.
And that album still kills.
It does.
It's such a great album.
Yeah.
It's irrationally good.
There's a lot of good albums. I think I have 4 or 5 of their albums on vinyl.
Because they're great.
Yeah, they really
there's just something about it.
Yeah, I went to a Ringo Starr concert this summer.
Okay.
ACL Live, and I was walking to the venue from the parking garage, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, that's Britt Daniel. And I got so excited. I've seen him like 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, because he's gigantic.
Yeah, he's taller than me, and he just is a very unique person. You're going to spot him every time.
That's right.
And then I was going to go up to him, and I just didn't. I just couldn't do it. But it made sense that he was going to Ringo's show because I mean they're so influenced by the Beatles. You can sense that influence in every song they do.
Well, especially like the drum work and the bass work. Yeah,
Jim Eno's work.
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Interesting. Okay, so total sidetrack here, but let's keep going on the past because you've done a lot of things even after you left Progress, Texas. We crossed paths in the early 2013-ish, probably sometime in there.
Yeah, before AYC, because I was in Young Men's Business League.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was at YMBL. Yeah. For a couple of years, and I think that's when we first met.
I've connected through a lot of people. Yeah. YMBL's been great, but we got involved. I did some economic development stuff with AYC. You kind of jumped in. All of a sudden, you're executive director. Yeah. So how do you go from politics to AYC? Like, what was that? How did that all work out? Obviously, Andrew Cates, you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me was it was very deliberate, right? It's like I was in politics and campaign politics for so long. The Progress Texas to me is the culmination of the end of my political work, and it is a nonprofit. And I had this really great fortune of working for a 501c3 that I created, a 501c4 that I created, and a political action committee that I created, right? And for those of y'all that don't know like what 501c3, 501c4 mean, it's just the designation of nonprofits. But I get to learn about this at like a really young age, like late 20s, early 30s, and I get to be nuanced into what that means and that management. And I start working with really great groups like Texas Freedom Network and like all these other really like Texas Organizing Project and all these great people doing great things throughout the state. And I just like this light switch turned on as like I got burned out at Progress, Texas, like literally clinically burned out. I was fried. And so there was about 9 months, 12 months where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, just kind of dabbled in different projects, wrote grants for some folks, worked on another campaign a little bit. And I was like, I kind of like the ED life. I just don't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
And so I had been a member for AYC for 18 months. Mm-hmm. And I loved what it was bringing for me. And when I saw that there was an ED executive director role opening, I was like, I haven't really played with this membership association, which is a 501c6. That'd be fun. And I had a really strong vision of what it could be. And I just applied, right? Like I kind of threw my name in the ring. And in retrospect, like seeing all the incredible people that applied, like I don't know how I got that role, right? Like I just like there were so many incredible people that were a part of it, and wanted to lead it. And they probably dodged a bullet because when I came in, it was also all of a sudden we realized it was kind of insolvent, right? And we had to go fix that problem.
Yeah.
But I think of that as like the transition from me having a political career into a nonprofit social impact career.
Yeah.
And changing it from a young professional organization that did happy hours to being a part of a group, which is, again, the best job I ever had was the first 2 years at AYC. To like, what if we were an advocate for the millennial workforce? What if we were doing something bigger than ourselves? And those were really big existential questions. And working with folks like Emmy Hill and Kelly Mosier, like I just go through it, and James Norte, like there's some John King, right? Like you just like, how is it that this room was filled with this level of brilliance?
Yeah.
And I go back to that, like just how amazing that time was.
I definitely feel like as the first member of AYC, watching the transformation of it being just kind of a social kind of extension of being a young person in town to transformational member experience, committees, culture, structural organization, where the organization was speaking on, what they were talking about. You brought it all.
Well, I appreciate that.
You really did.
But I also think that the board, the committee leaders that stepped up, right? I mean, Willie Cecil, I still remember at one point put together an event at the Container Bar where we had every single elected official show up.
Yeah.
Right? Like how wild is that? Like we had every candidate that wanted to serve our city stopping what they were doing to go hang out with a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds to tell them what they wanted to do for our generation on Rainey Street.
It's brilliant.
Like
it does, you don't feel like that's possible, and yet it is.
And yet it is. And all it took was someone having the idea and doing the work.
Yeah, I think it's doing the work and getting and hurting the cats of what young professionals are. I think that's the challenge of a young professional organization is how do you keep the leadership? How do you maintain the leadership? How do you maintain the organizational structure?
But I think that's
people
a problem.
Get older.
That is the problem with social impact work.
Yeah.
Like what you just described is the question like I sit there and wrestle with every day at work now about the nonprofit sector. You know, like David Smith is leaving the United Way. And that is a big question. It's like, so what does that look like next? Like who's the next person to step into that role?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, why do you think that there's parallels, or why do you think that that's such an issue?
Which is such a fast growing city. I mean, when I first moved here, we were 300,000 people in the city. And this is like early 2000s, mid 2000s. And if you wanted really good food, you went to go get either barbecue somewhere or Tex-Mex, right? Like your idea of like a good night out was Hula Hut or Chuy's.
Yeah, that's true. When I first moved here, it felt that way.
And that's okay, right? Yeah. But like the reality is now we have restaurants that have Michelin stars here.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine like if I told you that 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, like we would never have thought about it. And so the rapid growth the city is having while also not investing the infrastructure that we need. And that is social infrastructure, physical infrastructure, capital improvements, means that we're going to continue wrestling with a generation of folks retiring and us not having invested in the next generation of infrastructure and leadership.
I want to go back to what you just said with your expertise in social impact. I want to talk about social infrastructure.
Okay.
Because that's something I think that term might get thrown around, but I want to unpack that and understand how you describe that and maybe what cities or what practices you've seen that have been effective with social infrastructure.
That's a great question. And I don't know, right? Like, I think different people are playing with it at different ways and points, right? Like, I love New Orleans, right? You mentioned I got married in New Orleans. You came. Yeah. It was great.
It was awesome.
It was, Callie and I are going to go back this holiday, like we always do every year. We live there for a month at a time sometimes when we can. And they're in an inflection point as a city where they have to diversify away from some of their historic energy industries.
Yeah.
And you have people like Tulane and Loyola working with the startup scene and Idea Village and all these other, but they're also a small town, right? Like there's still only 400,000 or 500,000 people and they're not growing as rapidly. So the things that we have done here to impact that, whether it's Capital Factory or WeWork, what I tried to do at WeWork when I was there, like, or AYC, like we try to hit those things in the margins, but there's nobody that brings us together in a cohesive way yet. Mm-hmm. And the thing I always am just trying to figure out is like, how does the government become the funder of first resort, not the last resort? Right?
That's a great point.
Well, I'm still in that line from the City Innovation Office and Carrie and Daniel over there, right? Like, so how do you make that happen? Like, how do you make them be the first customer or find the first customer? So that way we can start some of this innovation. How do we get nonprofits to think about succession and transition so that way they are recruiting and hiring the next leader? And like, that takes deliberate practice and that takes deliberate planning. And I don't know that we're fully there yet because we're just trying to keep up with this massive growth.
Yeah. So we're growing so fast that we're outstripping our ability to plan.
That's right.
What I'm hearing.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So and that's obvious when you see something physical like transportation. It's maybe a little bit less obvious when you talk about how is this platform going to help people in Austin, what it's going to look like.
That's right. And that's why making the deliberate decision to move to social impact consulting is exciting because like we get to now do the strategic plan for the Austin water system.
Yeah.
Right. And we're working on that. And they're thinking about conservation, utilization, community development, community engagement, not just this is your rate, but like this is what your rate pays for. These are the people. This is the insurance that we're going to have water in the future. Like those are really cool, deliberate conversations.
Those are. You're jumping too far though. You're talking about the present. I want to talk a little bit about the past.
Okay.
Because
the past is my least favorite topic.
You had a really, well, and this is probably an ugly experience, but you had a really interesting thing that you went to WeWork at the height of WeWork. You jumped in.
Yeah.
So I remember the Austin Young Chamber had offices at
University
WeWork.
Park.
Yeah, University Park. I remember going there. It was a great time. You felt like you met 1 million people.
Yep.
And so that culture is kind of, it's almost addictive in a sense.
Yeah.
And so you leave AYC, you do a few things, but you go to WeWork.
Yeah.
And I don't, what's that show on Apple TV with Anne Hathaway? What was that called? Like We
Crash.
We Crash.
Which I have not watched.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I can't do it.
You just can't, is it too painful?
Soon.
Okay.
Yeah, too soon.
So essentially you were like the general manager of all the Austin locations.
Yeah.
Is that was your title, or executive director or whatever?
So my title was community director, which should have been a real alarm bell. It's like when you're creating new titles.
Yeah.
But really what I was is regional general manager.
Okay.
So I supervised the business operations of Central Texas. And that included, at the time, the go-to-market strategy for San Antonio. Okay. Which never happened.
It never broke in at all?
Well, a lease had been signed and then the crash happened.
Okay.
And it's important to distinguish, it wasn't a crash based on COVID, which people disproportionately associate.
Yeah.
It was an actual fundamental mismanagement of expectations, venture capital, and business planning. Well, then it was expounded about because of COVID.
So what did it look like from your perspective? What was it like to go through this WeWork thing and watch it? Like you feel like you're on top of the world. This is one of the most well-known companies. People love this place. And then all of a sudden things change, and you were there from that whole transformation. What was that like?
So I describe it as, so I was there for about 18 months. The first 6 months was, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so cool. The second 6 months was, this doesn't feel right. And the last 6 months was, oh my God, get me out. I think there's certain levels of like, I still remember this to this day. There was a big regional meeting of all the states that were part of our region. And our region was really unique. It was like the Mountain West. So it was Utah, Colorado, I think another state, and Texas.
That's interesting.
It's a really weird commingling.
That's what people do when they're based out of New York.
That's right.
We're all the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's kind of what happened, right? They were like, oh, Silicon Slopes is the same as, whatever. And so I remember all of us lining up, all of the staff members, based on age, which is an HR violation, by the way. Don't do that. But we did it anyway.
Okay.
And I realized there was about 200 people, 300 people that were there, and only about 4 or 5 people were to my right lined up as older than me, and everybody else was younger than me, including my boss. And I just still remember that moment being like, wait, there's no adult in the room.
Yeah.
And so you would look at business plans that required buildings to be occupied at 116% to be revenue neutral. And that's without furniture, fixtures and expenditures or maintenance or any of that stuff. Like nothing could go wrong. And like, this isn't like a gym or Netflix, right? Like you couldn't oversell the seats. And so I walked in thinking we're going to get WeWork Labs and Flatiron School. And we're going to be, I described it always as like, I wanted to be Austin's living room. I wanted to be a place where folks would throw events and do panels and have discussions. And that was just not the business model. And when I realized that wasn't the business model and it wasn't the desire of the organization and the economics didn't work, I tried to get out. And I had an exit date that was going to be February 15th, 2019. And the organization decided to fire me on February 11th.
Wow.
And so, I learned a lot. I will say that I got to where in some places, like the reason I'm teaching at Trinity is because I went to San Antonio and did like an apology tour. And Luis Martinez, who was the director of the Center of Innovation at Trinity, who was one of the people I apologized to, was like, yeah, but this would be a great class. Do you want to teach? And so like, it did open those doors. And so I don't regret it. And it was like getting a master's in like what not to do. But no, I mean, being at WeWork, out of all the things I've ever done in my career, was the thing that was the thing I didn't like, right? And didn't necessarily, I know that I gave more than I got.
Interesting. So you do this, and then you kind of you go on to do nonprofit consulting after this.
So Blue Sky Partners is born out of this.
Yeah.
And so, you talk about and joke around about the culture that was being outsourced by being in a WeWork space in a way, right? I met Nate Ryan and Tim Seaton, my eventual co-founders of Blue Sky Partners, at WeWork. And I was leaving the Young Chamber and they were leaving their marketing agency, Toy. And we just started working together and just started throwing each other contracts. And we realized if we're going to throw each other contracts, we might as well just start a company.
Yeah.
And so for a year when I was at Blue Sky, or when I was at WeWork, Blue Sky Partners existed, but I was like kind of the managing director, like throwing them leads, but I really wasn't doing that much. And then I left WeWork and I started really leaning into Blue Sky Partners. And at the time we were just a strategy consulting company. And the reality is, I think with most startups, if you have a contract and a need, we would figure out a way to go do it. And it wasn't until about now that we started realizing that we had a special focus in strategy and operations and change management. And that social impact focus is relatively new. But in the early years, it was like, we're just going to go do this. And we're all hammers. Those are all nails. Let's go. But we met at the WeWork, which is just still to this day the thing I loved about those spaces.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember when first seeing those guys. So we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
In every episode of Austin Eras, we explore the layers of Austin's history, its vibrant present, and its exciting future. Just like our city, your financial journey is a rich tapestry, woven with moments that define you. At Collective Advisors, led by Adam Flagg, Managing Partner, Senior Wealth Advisor, and Certified Financial Planner Professional, your financial story is in skilled hands. We understand that your financial needs are as unique as Austin's skyline. And much like the city's history, innovation is at the heart of what we do. Whether it's investment management, retirement planning, or navigating life's transitions, Adam and his team leverage a collective of dependable professionals to support your financial journey. Their goal is to help you build, maintain, and enjoy financial security. To start crafting your financial legacy with a team that's as dynamic and innovative as Austin itself, visit collectiveadvisors.com. or call 512-467-1923.
Welcome back. We're here with Matt Glazer, and we've been talking about Blue Sky Partners, which has been an amazing thing for you. You talked about kind of starting it in the ashes of WeWork and all of that. So you co-founded that, and as of June of 2024, you've now taken over as CEO. Yeah.
So Nate and Tim, after 8 years, both decided that they were ready to kind of experience what was next. And I mean, I don't fault them. Like, it's like one of those things where I am about 6-7 years older than they are. Right. And so I think they kind of looked at it and was like, it's time to figure out what the next chapter is for them. And that gave me the opportunity to really put my fingerprints on what I wanted to go do. And also gave me a new lesson of like what it's like to go from the guy behind the scenes to being the guy again. And to be honest, the last time I was a leader front and center like that was when I was at the Young Chamber.
That makes sense. Okay. So that was a new experience. And with kind of taking that front and center leadership, what changes did you make? Where did you really refocus or redo what Blue Sky was doing?
On the edges, right? Like, again, Nate and Tim helped build a really incredible culture. We've had incredible teammates throughout the years that have come and worked with us. And we're really fortunate. And one of the things that I think we really kind of noticed was the work that we do that makes us excited to wake up and do work, and the work that we were aggressively pursuing and willing to give discounts and like do what it took to get them.
Yeah.
Were the social impact work pieces.
Got it.
So strategic plans, operation plans, business, like strategic business plans, community engagement, program design, interim staffing. We wanted to be doing that for nonprofits and governments. And if you're for profit and you want to create a charitable giving program or an employee resource group or do any of that kind of thing, we want to do that, right? Like if you're for profit and want to have social impact, cool. We want to be a part of that journey with you. But by creating that focus over the past 6 months has really just allowed us to start exploring how do we do technical assistance for folks? cutting huge discounts so that way if a nonprofit that is in the education space or the healthcare space, the price isn't the issue. Like we can go figure out the money later, but like if you want to do long-term planning, that's the way it's going to be. I'm wrestling with this idea, and I hate this title, but I don't have another way to describe it. But it's called like an extinction plan. And in my head, it's like, what would it look like if an organization didn't think 3, 5, 7 years, but thought 100 years? And we talk about all the time about how organizations, especially nonprofit organizations, their vision and mission should put them out of business.
Yeah.
And the only nonprofit I've ever been able to find that has ever successfully achieved its mission or its vision is March of Dimes. And originally March of Dimes, their vision was to cure childhood polio. And it sucks that it's coming back, but like they achieved that. So what would it look like if every organization started thinking about, I want to achieve my vision and I want to put myself out of business?
Yeah, no, we just all pivot, right? We just continue to pivot and pivot again and pivot again, and leadership changes. And there's never a plan for extinction. I like that. It's almost like a time capsule that you bury and then you dig back up and you're supposed to end at that.
I mean, that's the hope, right? Is like, and what would it look like if you're required at that point to think about succession planning and transition planning and leadership development. So yeah, sure, you'll get your 5-year plan and you'll get your landscape analysis, you'll get your survey summaries, all the things that we do anyway. But I'm looking for that guinea pig that says, I want to think bigger and I want to think multi-generationally. And I want to say, like, our question is to make it where everybody in Austin has access to quality, sustainable food. Great. If you're that person and you want to do that, what would that look like to actually achieve that? And this doesn't work for the Young Chamber, right? Like the Young Chamber is a membership association. It doesn't work for the Greater Chamber, right? Like to put yourself out of business would mean everybody's, I mean, like, I don't know what that would look like. But there is still a niche of somebody that says, I want to end homelessness in Central Texas. Great. What would that actually fundamentally look like?
Interesting. So basically what I think I'm hearing you say is that even though there's for-profit and nonprofits, they operate kind of under the same capitalistic thinking rather than something that might be different on a nonprofit basis. Maybe,
but it also might be ego. And I'm guilty of this too, right? Yeah. Like I'm 42, 43 years old.
How old are you?
It depends on when you listen to this. Birthday's in February. Okay. So I think about it as like, I don't have kids. So what did this journey really mean? Yeah. Right? What's the legacy I'm leaving behind? And I look at Progress Texas and the Young Chamber, and I point to those things and I say, that's my legacy. Like, I'm glad I helped be a part of that. And I hope every executive director does that. But what if the executive director doesn't think that way? And they're thinking about that it as a territorial or ego thing. And I don't know that happens, but maybe it does. So what if we took that off the table? Mm-hmm. And that person can say, I was the first person. And then we recruited collectively, based off a succession plan, the second person. And it becomes a ladder as opposed to like a death spiral or something.
Okay.
And I don't know. And I'm still working this out. But I went on vacation, and I think that going on vacation is a great idea. People should get rest and recover. And while I was in Italy with my wife celebrating her birthday, I kind of came up with this. And I was like, what would that truly look like? So if anybody wants to be a guinea pig, I will charge our traditional strategic planning rates just to get this as a pilot done.
By the way, you guys do a really good email newsletter that goes out called The Forecast.
Uh-huh.
How do they get a hold of you, email wise or website wise? What's a good way for them to contact you?
blueskypartners.co. We can't afford the M.
Okay.
Every now and then I get an email saying we will sell you blueskypartners.com, and it's a very expensive proposition. So that's the most expensive letter in the English language for me. My email is matt@blueskypartners.co.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn, Matt Glazer. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay.
If you talk to a fiddler or a chef or a politician in New York, that's the wrong Matt Glazer.
So it could kind of be a common, but with the Z versus an S, right?
Z, yeah. I'm like the liquor distributors without the liquor or the distributing. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about Blue Sky. You've been the interim CEO for 3 different nonprofits in the last year and a half or so. Good Work Austin?
4.
Earthshare, Project Transitions. What's the 4th one?
Good Work Austin, Urban Roots.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting that, I just read a post by you on LinkedIn today that said, I get asked all the time, how do you do so much? Or hear jokes like, you must not sleep. I'm going to leave it at that rather than go into the rest of it. But I mean, ultimately, you're doing a lot.
Yeah.
You really are. And how do you do interim executive director work? Like, what does that look like? And what have you learned from being kind of boots on the ground with these organizations last year and a half?
I love it. First off, it's some of the hardest work I've ever done. to me, this is about change management and strategic and operational planning. And this to me is where like the rubber meets the road. The post you're referring to, I think it ends with me basically rattling off all of the people that make it possible.
Yeah.
And like the reality is it's about good teams. I mean, the Ursher team and Nida and Jordan and Emma are incredible, right? The Ursher board is incredible. The Project Transitions board is incredible. Jeannie Swink that is over there is incredible, right? Like the teams that are in the spaces are incredible. At Blue Sky Partners, Amber and Audrey on our team are incredible, right? Like, so when we do these, they actually route through Blue Sky Partners, and I'm more an operational lead or project manager. I mean, I'm more than that, but that's fundamentally what I am. But like, if we need to revise policies and procedures, I have not just the Project Transitions team or the Ursher team doing the work. I've got Tim Seaton and I got Nathan Ryan and I got, Audrey Sherman. Like I have teams that help me do these things.
Yeah.
And so it does multiply, and it's an amplifier, which is a great book, by the way. Multipliers, great book. I really encourage it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, tell me though about actually serving as the executive director.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What have you learned about the nonprofit world in kind of being right there and seeing these organizations and their missions? What does that tell you about Austin and where we're going?
So let me start by saying the personal stuff. When I was AYC in Progress, Texas executive director, I was young and I was ego driven. And I was absolutely thinking in both those roles, like, what makes me win that award or what makes me get that acclaim? I mean, at Progress, Texas, I wanted to be on the cover of Time, right? Like for turning the state around. At AYC, I wanted to win Austin Under 40, right? Like, and I was a finalist once, and that was an awesome experience. But I don't know that I was ready to check my ego. I think relatively recently in my life, I'm just like burying the hatchet with everybody. There's like, I was probably in the wrong in a lot of ways. They were probably in the wrong in a lot of ways. But like the reality is like, I just don't care. And so I'm kind of trying to make amends with folks. And so as I now move in like this interim role, I think of it as like, what does mission driven work truly look like?
Yeah.
And so Project Transition is an incredible organization. It is helping folks living with HIV make sure that they're not unhoused, right? It's like that simple. And they serve over 100 folks in 2 different facilities. There's recuperative and hospice care for folks that are living and dying with HIV. So that way there's either on the living side, we get them back to a place where they can go have supportive housing. And on the dying side, that they're dying with grace. And it's an organization that's been around for decades and is quietly doing impactful work. And you know what? Vision and mission don't pay bills. And so how do you then also support the organization having sustainable funding, a culture and policies and procedures so that the staff is taken care of, that they're being paid a fair and adequate wage to live in Austin, which is getting more and more expensive, especially for a social worker, right? Like, so it doesn't, like, I can't pay bills and they can't pay bills off of vibes. And so like working with boards to know that and think about that and think 4 or 5 years down the road while burying these hatchets and like putting the ego aside is like way more exciting. And it just, there's days where it feels like work. A lot of days it doesn't. And it does, because I am being more intentional and more intentionally collaborative and less self-ego driven. I get to learn from these folks that have been doing this work for 40, 50 years. And I get to meet folks that are so passionate and they can point to something like the fact that we pass a transit bond, but have never broken ground on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That are looking at it and saying, we talk about food access and food resilience, but like we're folks who want to volunteer to help our food pantry, right? Why can't we find volunteers? Like they're asking these really, really critical questions that allow me to be focused on the actual delivering of the work. And that means that I can now point to those things and say, I'm charting a course. I'm leaving a legacy.
Yeah, you found deeper meaning in the work that you do.
100%.
And I mean, tell me a little bit more about working with students, because you're doing that in an interesting way too with the deeper meaning. You've gone back to Trinity.
Yep.
You've been an entrepreneur in residence for quite some time.
3 years as entrepreneur in residence, but they've told me I can't do it again.
You're not allowed. Normally it's a 1 year thing.
It's normally a 1 year thing, and they were like, my first year was the pandemic year, and they're like, we'll let you do it one more time. That's it.
You're like a football player with a red shirt after red shirt year.
That's right.
I like this.
That's right.
So you're doing that, and you've done guest lecturing there. Mm-hmm. You've done some guest lecturing at University of Texas as well.
And I've done some supportive work at Tulane for their accelerator program. Yeah, the teaching, I mean, I think you might hear it as like we're talking, right? Is like the teaching is now the thing that motivates me. And I think a lot of the work I do is to teach. I tell folks all the time, like, I don't need you to know how to do my craft. I can tell you how to do it and teach you how to do it. I need you to be interested and curious and a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
And thinking about people and like have that human empathy and that human-centered design approach, and all the other stuff will come. And I find working with students amazing because when I first started doing it, I would walk into the room. Well, first off, when I first started teaching at Trinity, it was my alma mater. And so I was like, oh, they're going to confuse me as a student. They don't, nobody, no, it's never going to happen. The beard is gray, the hair is gone. Like, but I walk around in a t-shirt and jeans and like have a backpack, and I don't know what in my head. I was like, someone's going to confuse me. No one has ever confused me as a student.
You just try to be the cool professor as much as you can.
Well, so I got advice about that early on from my wife. And she's like, don't try to be cool.
All right.
Just try to be yourself. And if they think you're cool or they like you, they will. That'll be a nice outcome. But if you try to be cool, then you're not going to hold them to the standards that you have.
I like that.
And it was actually really enlightening because I think I've had really good feedback over the years from my students. And part of it is like, he's hard, he's steadfast in like his deadlines. But when I need extra time and I communicate beforehand, he'll give it to me. Or when he grades a paper, there's feedback all over that paper, even if it's an A, right? Like, and I'll take that every day of the week.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's made me better. It's just made me better at my craft because I can't just say how we do things. If I don't say why, a student will be like, I don't believe this is the best way. They will hold me, their critical thinking is developing in such a rapid way that I have to understand what it is. And if I don't understand photovoltaic technologies because they want to build like solar panel type stuff,
sure,
I got to go learn it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a true story. A student wanted to create a light bulb that would be self-creating, self-regenerating in some way to create solar power too, right? To recapture that. And I had to learn about like Newton's like theories of physics and laws and I can't even, but like, that's not how this works. Energy doesn't work that way. I'm working for the nonprofit sector. How was I supposed to know that stuff? Right. And so like, I have to like learn and be held accountable in some ways.
I love this. So you've really gotten to grow as a person, getting to work with these students as well and really learning from them.
I've also learned every Starbucks and coffee shop stop from William Cannon to Trinity. Yes.
So you've been on the road some. You've traveled back and forth quite a bit. Tell me a little bit more about what you think students are like today. You're getting to see Central Texas. You're getting to see San Antonio. You're getting to see Austin. A little bit of New Orleans as well. But what do you kind of have? I mean, we're thinking about the future of Austin. What do you think about these students and how they're coming out, how they're viewing the world, and how that might be different than when you went to school?
So they're not weirdly, that's the wrong word. They're both more cynical.
Okay.
And more social impact focused.
Interesting.
So I remember when the very first class or the very first year I talked about LLCs and S Corps and B Corps and like all these things, right? And it got to a point where I didn't have to talk about B Corps anymore, right? Because it was just like, no, you do this, right? Like people have to be a part of this as well. It's not just profits. And they just think about stuff like that, right? Like the business ideas they're coming up with are all over the place, but they're usually, if there are 8 teams or 7 teams participating in the Summer Accelerator, which is like fully fleshed out like business ideas, and they're working towards traction and revenue and competing for money, there's inevitably somebody that is working on addressing microplastics or solar or clean energy or reducing waste or any number of things. And they're thinking about it from putting sensors on plastic bottles so you know if they have gotten too much microplastics in there, to the photovoltaic technology, right, is how do we recapture some of the solar light? Or one student wanted to figure out how to make paper out of fecal waste.
Oh, okay.
Right, like, but like they're like because they wanted to make sure that there wasn't, we weren't tearing down trees.
I like it.
Right, but I have to learn these, but so like when I was first starting like businesses, I was like, how do I profit off of this idea? Like it was definitely a profit motivation.
Yeah.
And like profit motivation alone is not a thing.
No, not right now.
Not for them.
So there's creation and there's the offset of what you've created essentially.
Yeah.
But So that's interesting to me. I think those students have a lot of great ideas then, and it'll be fun to see how they kind of go. So I want to turn it to a little bit more fun now. We've gone really serious for a little bit. So what's exciting you about Austin right now? Let's just talk about the city. Yeah. You're out and about. Last I saw you at the Thirsty Nickel. We've been to Mean-Eyed Cat. We've gone different places. Yeah. We've seen the world, around Austin change quite a bit. When you think about like where you're seeing shifts in this city, where you're seeing things, you know a lot about a lot of things. A lot of times you're breaking news to me that I don't know. So
okay, that's an honor to hear.
No,
that.
But I absolutely think so. So I think my question to you is just simply, where are you seeing change? What's exciting?
So I love being an Austin FC fan. Okay. Exciting is probably not the right word. I think we are a couple of years away from being really, really something fun to watch. They're always a good time, but it is hard to imagine a world in which we had professional sports in Austin, and here we are with like an MLS team.
Yeah.
And like, that's awesome to me. And there's talks of a WNBA team.
The WNBA, Kevin Durant might be involved in that. Yeah.
Like, that's wild to me. I also love the WNBA.
Yeah.
Like, we have an F1 track, right? Like, those are things that I think are really fun and exciting and are different culturally than when I moved here, right? Like, I'm nervous that we are losing our essence of live music and artist, and the idea, and if people aren't aware, but like the idea that Leslie would run for mayor, I think that era in Austin is over, right?
Yeah.
We're probably beyond that now, right? We're one of the top 10 largest cities in America. And
we take ourselves too seriously perhaps at times.
I think so, right? And the folks or the innovation or the cultural things that are here have been, like WeWork, kind of outsourced, right? We outsourced it to Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, right? And like, you can have opinions about that. I have mine, right? But like, I would like to have us start having that born and bred here. I think Brad Stuver is a great example from Austin FC. It's like somebody who is aggressively working to be part of old Austin culture, right? And I am excited that exists in some ways. I think food and beverage is another place where we're seeing rapid change in a really positive way. Like, I don't think we'll ever be like Houston, where we have the best Korean and Vietnamese and traditional Chinese.
Yeah, we can't hit all the cultures with the size of our city compared to like a Houston.
But we do have not just great barbecue now, like Leroy and Lewis, which has a Michelin star.
I've never been, but
it's incredible.
Yeah,
anytime you want to go, it's in my neighborhood.
I've done Interstellar. That's another one.
Also
La Barbecue is the third, right?
Yeah.
So I think I read that there's only 5 Michelin-starred barbecue restaurants in the entire world,
and they're all in Texas.
3 here.
Well, three in Austin. I think all 5 are.
There's one in Korea or something.
Okay, maybe it's 4.
Yeah, I don't know. Check.
But like 3 are in Austin.
Yeah,
and like they were all doing incredible. Micklethwait is also on the list of like recommended.
Yeah,
right. And most of these people are working together through Good Work Austin.
Yeah.
To think about what it looks like to have fair hospitality and fair wages and advocate for paid time off and family leave and child care. They were huge on the recent bond that Travis County just did, right? Yeah. Like that's amazing to me, because it's super easy to think about it as like insular and like we're doing this one thing and we're focusing on, fair wages for our staff, right? And you could say that that's the beginning, middle, and end, and they're not there. And like they're beyond that, and they want to train folks how to enter the culinary world. They want to train folks to do these things. I think the more interesting things that are going on are the folks that are saying, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to do one little piece on the outside on the margin. And that is going to build the social cohesion and the glue to then allow us to partner with somebody else. And then allow us to partner with somebody else. Because Good Work Austin doing culinary training means that maybe could they do their culinary training at Project Transitions?
Yeah.
In one of our kitchens, because we have industrial kitchens, and could they maybe teach one of our residents or 2 of our residents to like then get into the hospitality sector? So now they're not chronically homeless or unhoused. They are trained to be in the hospitality sector, to go be in a space like that. I don't know, but like that culinary kitchen allows them to have one Lego piece that can latch onto somebody else.
Yeah, upskilling in the restaurant business would be incredible.
Huge.
So tell me a little bit more, since we're talking about the restaurant space and Good Work Austin. It sounds like it's almost like an alliance fighting for better business practices, or how would you describe really how Good Work Austin works?
I think it is, I would put it a different way. I would say it is local Austin restaurants or Central Texas restaurants working to preserve the Austin culture we love, protecting the restaurants that we love, and the city we care about, and running towards those values. It is folks like Epoch and Olamay and Brentwood Social and Mars is like New Orleans, Casey's New Orleans Snowballs.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Like when I think of these folks, these are the folks that make me excited to continue to live in Austin. Right? I'm not excited about the new Applebee's opening up, right? Like, are you? like, I don't need, like, look, I love a good Perry's Pork Chop on Fridays. I think that's iconic, right?
Yeah.
But if they built another Perry's in South Austin, like in Slaughter, like I wouldn't care, right? I don't want that in my life. But if I were to see Suerte go away, or I were going to see Locadora go away, or Bambino go away, I'd be like actively sad about that.
Yeah.
And I went to Aviary for years and loved that place. And I met great people that worked there. And Alex does Midnight in the Garden now, which is this amazing concept of bringing restaurants together in his own backyard. It was born out of COVID, and I would never know about that if I hadn't gone to Aviary. But then Aviary was bought by a private equity firm, and now it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
and that's sad to me, right? It's the natural organic process, but when Eater releases like their restaurants that closed this month,
I just saw it.
It's like every time I'm like, oh, another one. And so I think about that as the quintessential thing about like, how do we preserve what we love while fighting for the thing we want next? Transportation is a great issue, right? It's like
that. Say that again. How do we preserve what we love
while fighting what we want for next?
That's great. That's exactly what I want to talk about with this podcast. That's when we talk about the future. This is what you're saying.
That's right.
That's your concept.
I think that is what keeps me in this work.
Yeah.
Because it would be super easy to be cynical and say it's hard work and I don't want to do it anymore. I don't have nearly enough money. I work for nonprofits. I can't donate to all the causes that matter to me. But what I can do is really be explicit about Good Work Austin exists. Yeah. I hope everybody goes and supports that organization, or at the very least goes to those restaurants.
Those restaurants, yeah.
Right? If you just did that, one of those two things, it changes so much. And you probably want to go to Barley Swine anyway, right? Like you probably want to go to Olamay anyway.
They just won Michelin stars,
right?
So why would you not? Yeah.
So like, go do that. Go to Odd Duck, right? Do that. Go to Epoch.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So you've just listed off a bunch, and this is like probably telling someone to pick their favorite child. But what's a favorite under the radar place you like to take guests when they come to town? So if someone's listening to this podcast, they live local, or maybe they live somewhere else, and they're like, where do I go? I want to know the Matt Glazer recommendation.
So I would say Locadoro and Bambino are two high picks right now. I think that Bambino has one of the best pizzas in town that nobody's talking about. It's on Springdale. It's really, 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 really good. I think Locadoro, also incredibly good. They're the same family. That's Adam Orman and Fury.
Okay.
And like they are incredible. I think if the season is right, if the temperature is right, the weather is right, go see the Texas Playboys play sandlot baseball, right? Go get barbecue there, go get oysters, go get cheap beer, do that.
Okay.
God, restaurants. I'm a big sucker for like Ramen Tatsuya and the Tatsuya brands.
Sure.
All of them. Probably going to do that after we get done here.
Yeah.
It's like a staple thing I love to do once or twice a week.
That is quite a staple. You're hitting it a lot.
I mean, I go there all the time. And it's funny because Callie doesn't really like it, so I go mostly by myself with AirPods or a book. Man, there's like a laundry list of places I would go. I mean, the thing is, like, none of them are off the beaten path. I think everybody that lives in Austin knows where to go. Nobody's doubting. Like, you go to Odd Duck if you want like new American cuisine.
No,
like,
but I'd say you know more than most, and I think you're a tastemaker in some ways that you're going places that other people are not.
Well, maybe, but like, you know, every time I go to Nickel City, right?
Yeah.
Like Ramin Cat, with you or without you, the place is bumping, right? It's like those are great places. People should go there. I don't know. I probably could rattle off another 50 if you gave me enough time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this. If you could keep or maintain one weird thing about Austin that's still around, what would that be and why? What are you trying to preserve to keep Austin weird?
So I'm going to say something kind of controversial. I don't think Austin's weird anymore.
Got it.
I mean, I think the weirdest thing about Austin is the amount of Cybertrucks that drive around this town, right? Like, those things are fugly.
They're strange looking.
And
yes,
they
I
are
would agree with you.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time not pointing and laughing, but that's a different conversation. I would say the thing that concerns me the most as we continue not to invest in infrastructure is that we're going to lose things like the charm of the trail, right? That I think the trail, like the trail and conservation network is incredible, right? But people spend most of their time on the 4-mile loop from Mopac to Congress.
That's it.
And they don't see the beauty of the boardwalk and what they've been doing around the dam and what they're building out there. And that's honestly, I think, the best part of that trail. That people don't go really on the biking trails around the Shoal Creek Conservation District and stuff like that. So I think truly enjoying those are really important. And I think we need to do a deep investment in live music and in artists, and specifically the folks that play in the venues that exist in East Austin. Yeah. I think we're about to lose so many traditional Black and Latino and Hispanic communities and where they play music and where their music is found, that if we don't, as a community, invest in it, it's going to go away. And I think back is like, I love jazz music. I can think of maybe 2 jazz venues left in Austin. It's the Elephant Room and Roosevelt Room, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe
those two. I don't even know if Roosevelt Room
would count. I think it's more of a bar.
There's a jazz club where the Spaghetti Works used to be. I'm going way old school.
Yeah, but like now that like that's like
it's in the basement.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
that's good to know because like I mean I don't even get my hands around that anymore.
Yeah,
but like if it wasn't for Gary Keller, like Saxon Pub was probably gone by now.
Yeah,
but he invested in it, and we can't rely on one billionaire to invest to keep Austin the way we want it to be.
We can't. So how do you do it? Is it institutionalized? Is there commissions that need to step up? Or are there organizations that need to be created? Is it just getting people together? I think my question universally in my head is what's the next generation of leadership look like in Austin, and what are those people going to have to do to make Austin continue to achieve the success that they're having? Because I think that's a fundamental question I ask myself a lot.
Yep.
It feels like a lot of the leaders in Austin are 60 plus.
I think that's right. And I think the folks that are our age, well, our age is now 40 plus.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
We're
like,
no longer young.
I'm no longer young and I'm not going to win AU40, right? Like,
yeah,
cool. Like that's great. And I think that we have to start saying if someone wants to raise their hand and say, I want to lead, we got to start supporting them. Yeah. And I don't even know who those folks are, but this is why I like teaching, right? Is like, I'm going to find them. They're going to materialize in some way. And I think we've spent an entire generation saying what can't be done or what's really hard or litigating literally the wins, like the transportation bond, that at some point we have to do like, no, we're going to stand up and enough is enough. Like we have debt on our books of the city without the benefits of the infrastructure. So the transportation bond is a great example where we're going to get half as much for twice as much. And like, that's not what voters wanted. And I'm not saying that as like, hey, we shouldn't be then doing this project. If anything, I'm saying we should be breaking ground today
now
to get what we asked for as best we can. And then if that doesn't get us the full way there, then we come back and we talk to voters again.
Infrastructure is going to be very inflationary in the next decade.
That's right.
So you got to go now if you're going to do it.
And that's right. And we got to do it because the city needs it. Like we can't build freeways to solve this problem. And I think that the reality is we have to start actively communicating all of the time. And I think it has the benefit of both preserving the soul of our city and fighting the loneliness epidemic that's actually going on in the world, right? Is if I start talking with you and then you bring a person and then I bring a person and then we bring 2 more people, now we're just like locking arm in arm to do these things.
Yeah.
And those things might be like what we used to do at the Young Chamber, where we would go to a bank that was closed and have someone cater a meal for us. And then that person might accidentally or inevitably become the next hot shit chef as my stomach growls. Right?
You ready for that tattoo?
Yeah, I am. But like, those are the kind of things we got to do is like, we got to support folks early and we got to support them often.
Yeah, I agree. I think Leadership Austin used to be that. I think they still are in some ways, but I think a city of our size needs more.
I think that's
leadership development kind of programs and getting people plugged in. I don't feel like there's enough ways. I feel like there's a lot of people that move here that don't feel like they know the inner circle, and then they just don't participate.
I think that's right. And I'm a huge fan of Leadership Austin. I'm a graduate of the program. Mm-hmm. I love that organization. Yeah. And I think that is part of the toolkit. I don't think we are at a spot anymore of 1 million plus people.
It's not the only
one organization is the solution. It has to be Leadership Austin. It has to be United Way. It has to be Mobile Loaves and Fishes. It has to be the Other Ones Foundation. It has to be a coalition of folks working collaboratively and not having a mindset of scarce resources.
Yeah.
There's not there's more than enough.
There's no scarcity in Austin of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, we have abundance everywhere.
Except for traffic.
Yeah.
Except for roads.
Yeah. We have a lot of that. What's it going to take to keep you in Austin the next 15 years? If you think about your future and you think about what you're doing and how you're doing things at Blue Sky and how you look forward, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things you're like, hey, I'll stick around for this?
Yeah, I wrestle with that a lot. I'm not going to lie.
I do too.
Yeah, I sometimes I wonder if my time in Austin has come or is coming to an end. And there are places that I look at, or I've done work. We've done work in Tulsa. We've done work in Birmingham. And you sit there and you're like, would it be fun to go be a big fish in a small pond? Like, or look at this really cool ecosystem, or look what they're wrestling with. Like Tulsa is really wrestling with its history in some of the most beautiful ways I've ever seen. And the food scene is there, and they have all this Art Deco architecture that nobody talks about. But I live in Tulsa, right? And maybe I want to live in Tulsa. I don't know, right? And I say that because I talk to friends from cities like that, and like it's legit. I would say the biggest things for me, I'm a runner. I'm chronically injured right now, so I'm not running the way I used to. But I think the running community has to be strong. I run with Rogue Running, and I highly recommend being a part of a community if you're going to do that. That has the knock-on effect of then now we have to support like Marathon Kids and the Austin Runners Club.
Yeah.
Which then has a knock-on effect that we have to support the Distance Challenge because that's what supports that. Which then has the knock-on effect that Cap 10K has to be good and the Austin Marathon has to be sold out and Decker Challenge has to be sold. So I mean, I think by just saying I want to be a runner, it magnifies a lot of things. I think the food and beverage hospitality sector has to be really strong. I love food. I love drinks. I love that stuff. And I'm not interested in going to a big Yum brand place.
Yeah.
And then I think the reality too is I look at the way ecology and conservation and the world is changing, and I'm as nervous about Superstorm Uri as I am about drought in 120 degree summers. And so something has to be done some way where Texas can be resilient to the climate changes that we're seeing. And, people don't talk about the fact that the lake never got above 50% in its levels this year.
No, it's not even come close. I'm on a nonprofit, Candlelight Ranch, and we have lake access up near between Marble Falls and Lago Vista, and it's been dry for 3-4 years.
Which is terrifying.
It is, and the kids don't get to go kayak or canoe.
Right.
I mean, you're literally missing these opportunities. And from what I've read, the water is in Texas. It's just not where it needs to be.
That's right.
But at some point, it's not going to be where it needs to be either, or it can't even be transported where it is with the population growth that we've seen.
And that's right. And then that goes back to public policy about like, what are we doing with impervious cover? What are we incentivizing on rainwater harvesting? Why does everybody need to have a green yard? I mean, not having a yard to mow has been one of the greatest things that I've ever. I mean, I have a very small plot of green grass that I don't do anything to maintain, and it either dies or comes back, and I don't care, right? But like, I live in a small condo. It's exactly the right size in South Austin, and I love that, right? But like, am I supposed to make all the sacrifices for the folks that live beyond the ecology's means? And again, this isn't like some sort of like spread it all around. It's just like, if that's the case, that's fine, but then let's have a plan. And right now, we don't have an updated land use plan. We don't have an updated like ecology plan. We don't have an imagination of what the city could look like. And until we do that, I'm nervous that it relies on too many high-performing, high-engagement folks to do those solutions. And so what keeps me here are folks like you, folks that I've met through all of these different interactions in my life, my running community, my wife, and the food and drink and hospitality sector.
Yeah.
But 80% of that I can relocate and
find somewhere else. So when you think about Austin, and let's end on a hopeful vibe.
Yeah.
What do you think now looking forward after the criticisms and they're fair and everything you mentioned are good? What makes you hopeful about the next generation of Austin? What makes you hopeful about 25 years from now? Is Austin going to continue to be the powerful city, the city that draws people in from everywhere, or won't it? What's going to do that for Austin?
So the hope comes from that these are not small questions, and we have tackled and addressed and fixed bigger problems than this.
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
I think about the Great Recession. I think about the dot-com boom and bust here in Austin. And the dot-com boom and bust, we were the first in, the last out.
Yeah, tech was really
hammered.
not diversified here in Austin.
And so what did the city do? Made plans, right? And those plans were to put a medical school here, right? Those plans were to like diversify the industry outside of just .com and tech and SaaS companies. Capital Factory gets created, right? The military and AFWorks and like all of that stuff comes here, right? Your medical school gets built. UT moves its commercialization school into Macombs, IC squared, and therefore folks like me can go get an MSTC degree and get a technology commercialization degree. Like that stuff's really cool, right? Like on the nonprofit side, we start questioning whether or not we're going to address the unhoused community. And Alan Graham and Mobile Loaves and Fishes and Community First
great
steps
organization,
up.
So great.
Chris Baker and the Other Ones Foundation step up, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so now it's not just Caritas, Echo, and United Way. It's also Project Transitions and TOOF. And like, so we can tackle really big things. I think it takes 2 or 3 things, and I may lose count, right? One, we got to be able to have the conversation about the things that are hard and it not look like a moral statement. It's just, this is hard. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just truth.
Yeah.
The second is once we identify those things, we got to start being willing to do the work together to address them. And the third is we can't expect to solve it overnight. The dot-com boom and bust was a signal. We started working on it. Then the Great Recession happened. And it really wasn't until like the mid-2010s, early 2010s that we started really seeing those dividends paying off.
Truly. Yeah.
And now ACL is 2 weekends long. We have F1. We have Austin FC. We have Michelin stars. The cost of living here is a little high, but you know what? So is the revenue and income we all make here, right? Like there are solutions.
Yeah.
And if we do those 3 things, I think we can get through most anything.
I like it. Matt Glazer, Blue Sky Partners CEO. Thank you for joining me on the Austin Airs podcast.
It's so much fun. This is great.
It's been a pleasure. Learned a lot, and looking forward to having you on again sometime.
Well, I can't wait. Thanks, man.
Right. Thank you.
Austin Eras, featuring Adam Flagg, is brought to you by Collective Advisors. Collective Advisors offers investment advisory services through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on Austin Eras are not affiliates of CWM LLC, and opinions expressed by guests may not reflect those of CWM LLC. This show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes and is not intended to provide specific legal, tax, or other professional advice. For a comprehensive review of your personal situation, always consult with a qualified professional.